I've been on a journey to test every single Nikon branded Z mount lens, and I have officially used every single zoom lens in the line. Today, I want to rank all the Nikon branded zoom lenses by their value for money. Bang for buck is kind of hard to put into ranking, and so a few notes on how I'm doing this. I will be judging these lenses based on my value for money score at zwadephotosales.com/theopticexplorer, which takes into account a mix of optics, versatility, that's how many genres you're covering or how many things you can do with it, and even build quality. In this video, we will definitely have some ties in value for money because it can only be 1, 2, or 3. That's low value, got what you paid for, or high value if I give it a 3. And so we will take those tiebreakers at the end and we will arrange them and get a true best to worst value for money, I think. I should also note that prices for this video will be pre-price increase, which is expected in June of 2025. But those increases should be more or less uniform and they shouldn't affect the overall placement that I decide on. Rather, they're just going to make everything less of a good value. One final reminder, I said it already, but if I gave a lens a 3, it means it's high value, it's good bang for buck. If it has 2 points, then that means it's worth the price that you pay, and if it gets a 1, it means it's a bad value. So if you're ready, let's go. All right, so we got a total of 18 zoom lenses to get through here. Our first one is the DX12-28 f3.5 to 5.6 PZ, $359.95. I gave it an overall value of 2. Pretty simple. It's not a bad optic. The PZ adds some versatility, but the variable aperture decreases the versatility. It's kind of cheap feeling plastic mount, and plastic mounts always get a 1 on build quality. It is inexpensive though, so it ended up at 2 points, and so I think it's worth the money you pay. The 14-30 f4S, $1349.95. I gave it a 2. This lens has gone through a change recently in my scoring. I used to call it a high value for 3 points, but I did recently downgrade it to a 2, saying that it's just worth the money. That is because of another lens that's coming up in a bit. It's pretty versatile, going out to 14, and the genres where you do need to go that wide, the aperture generally isn't that big of a deal in those genres anyway. So it's also a constant aperture, so that helps bring up the score. Most importantly, though, is the optics. This is a very good optic with top marks all over the place, and it feels pretty tanky in the hand. Today, it gets 2 points. It's totally worth the money. The 14-24 f2.8S gets a 2. It's $24.99.95. This is a little harder because I feel like it's a little bit overpriced, and I have really since day one. But optically, it is as close to perfect as you could possibly hope for. 14 millimeters is kind of necessary in some genres, and you can do quite a bit of other stuff with wide-angle zooms as well. I don't have a category for slightly overpriced, and this certainly isn't a bad value if you're in those genres that you would use this in. There's just other options on the market for significantly less money, which is why I call this worth the money. And side note, it is a lot of fun to use. The 16-50 f3.5 to 6.3 VR, I gave it a 2. It's $309.95. It's a really cheap build, but it's not very expensive. It's pretty normal or weak optically, but it's a cheap kit lens with an okay focal range and a variable aperture. It sounds like I'd give it a 1 for bad value, but it's not as long as you get it in a kit, because it comes with a discount if you get it in a kit. Only get this lens if it's in a kit, okay? If you don't have another lens, that's fine, but if you're just buying a body only, there's tons of other lenses that you should get besides this one. The 17-28 f2.8, it gets a 2. It's $1199.95. This is the lens that makes the 14-30 just worth the money and not a high value lens. This lens isn't high value itself. It's worth the money because if you know you need 14 millimeters, 17 millimeter just isn't going to cut it. So I can't give it a real high value. On wide angle lenses, the wider, the better, which hurts this lens's versatility. But the f2.8 helps bring it up again. It's just not enough to make it high value for now. I may call it high value later because optically this lens is pretty good and a ton of fun. The DX18-140 f3.5 to 6.3 VR. I give it a 2. It's worth the money for $639.95. This is a very fun lens to use. I enjoyed using it very, very much. Optically, It's weak in some areas and middle of the road in others. It's a cheaper build quality too. What makes this lens is the versatility of the focal range, and its focus performance is really good. It's actually pretty quick. And again, a ton of fun. The 24-70 f4S, it got a 3. It's $999.95. This lens is straight up just a good value. f4 is fine because it's not variable aperture, and optically this lens is really good. Lots of top marks. It's also really versatile because 24-70 is just a really useful range. At full price, it's worth the money, but you can actually do even better if you get it as a kit lens, even though it's way too good to be called a kit lens. This lens almost justifies creating a special point bonus for value for money, but I'm not going to do that, so it just stays at a 3. And that's our first one of this video. The 24-200 f4 to 6.3 VR. I gave this lens a 1. It's $899.95. I hate this lens. Optically, not very good. It got all the lowest scores possible in the optical categories. The only saving grace is the versatility with the 24-200, and it got a top score in that. But it feels cheap, it's variable aperture, and somehow it's still $900. This lens needs to be $500 cheaper to match what it actually is. And that's our first lens to make it into the 1 category. The 24-70 f2.8S, it gets a 2. It's $2399.95. But it's almost optically perfect in its score. It gets all the extra points and such. It's also really versatile. You can do almost anything with these mid-range zooms, and they're just like that. Mid-range zooms are just versatile. It also feels pretty darn sturdy. It sounds like a perfect lens, right? I actually do still think it's a little bit overpriced at $2,400, but because it's so good, it is really hard to argue that. That's why I give it a 2. It's worth the money. Because it is slightly overpriced, we will put it towards the bottom. That will help us whenever we go like best to worst value. The 24-120 f4S. This is an interesting one at $1,099.95. I give it a 2 to 3. Optically, I scored this lens kind of all over the place, but most importantly, the overall image comes together really well, regardless of its individual optical scorings. It's really versatile, and it's actually a lot of fun to walk around with. Huge fun factor. I don't like external zooms, but otherwise the build quality feels pretty good in the hand, and it's a good looking lens. I gave this lens a 2 or a 3 because it's really worth every penny at this full price, but there is an opportunity to get a discount on it if you get it as a kit lens. Then it's just a smoking good deal. And so because of that, we are going to give this kind of partially down towards the 2 to help us organize these later. The 24-50 f4 to 6.3. I gave this a 1 or a 2. It's $399.95. This lens is very average optically. It could be a bad value, or it could totally be worth the money. How? Only if you get it as a kit lens at a discount and do not have any other lenses. Only $400 on its own. The focal length is very strange, maxing out at 50mm, and the 50mm is variable aperture, which makes it a 50mm f6.3. I ask, would you ever buy a 50-6.3? No, you probably wouldn't buy that if it was a prime lens. It's not actually super useful. It's a weird focal range. I kind of just want to say that it's a 1 for the purpose of this video. It's just a really awkward lens to be so optically average, or in some cases weak. So if you do get it as a discount because you have no other lenses and it comes with your camera, you can call it a 2, but in this video, I'm definitely going to call it a 1. The 28-75 f2.8, I gave it a 2. It's $1199.95. This lens is pretty middle of the road optically, but its constant f2.8 aperture makes it pretty versatile, and it's a mid-range zoom, so it's even more so versatile. Mid-range zooms just be like that. Since it's better than half the price of the 24-70 f2.8S, I'd love to give it a high value tag, but the f2.8 does not save it from how great the 24-70 f4S is, and that lens absolutely kills this lens optically, so I call it a 2. It's worth the money. The 28-400 f4 to f8 VR, I gave it a 2, $1299.95, even though I didn't really enjoy using this lens that much. This lens is painfully middle of the road optically. The only thing it really shines in is obviously its versatility. It does a lot of stuff, and it does all that stuff pretty okay. I give it a 2 because it does a lot for the price that you pay, but the caveat here is, again, I just didn't have a good time using it. It's useful, and it's definitely for somebody, but that f8 is horribly tragic to me personally. Get a little messy over here. DX50 to 250 f4.5 to 6.3 VR. I gave it a 2 to 3. It's $375.95, and this lens is actually fairly optically solid, and it's really not that expensive on its own. It does feel cheap, but it's a pretty useful focal range with the caveat of being a variable aperture. Since it is useful, cheap, and not bad optically, I give this a 2. It's worth the money, but I do kind of come close to making it a 3. The only reason I don't make it a 3 right now is because it can become a 3 if you get it as a kit. But I feel like the lens itself maybe deserves to be a 3. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to put it in the 3 category, but I do score it a 2 to 3. Definitely try to get it in a kit if you're interested in this lens, but I would endorse buying it on its own. Actually, this has to hang out slightly towards the 2s. The 70 to 180 f2.8. I gave it a 2. It's $1249.95. This lens is very middle of the road optically, but it's weak in black and white ability. Build quality is to be expected at this price point. What makes this lens really valuable is the fact that its big brother, our next lens, is over double the price, leaving this lens with a 2. It's worth the money, but it's really close to a 3 high value. I may even change that later since there are no other options like this, like there is with the wide zooms and the mid-range zooms. If an f4 ever comes, that'll definitely change things. We'll put this in the 2s, kind of pushing up towards the 3. The 70 to 200 f2.8 VRS. I gave it a 2, begrudgingly. It's $2699.95. I have always found this lens 2 things: kind of boring and overpriced. It's insanely sharp and it feels robust and sturdy, and I appreciate the internal zoom. That's fantastic. But its rendering is just not inspiring. It's the best tool for a job, and that's it in my opinion. It's also really fast, and it is a staple in working photographers' bags. Its speed, build, and insane sharpness are why I give this a 2, but I personally feel it's maybe $300 overpriced. So for that reason, I'm going to put this kind of maybe more in the 3s because it's real close to just being called overpriced. Again, if an f4, like a 70 to 200 or 70 to 180 f4 ever comes from Nikon, this is definitely becoming like a bad value. The 100 to 400 4.5 to 5.6 VRS. This is going to make me pretty unpopular. I gave it a 1. It's $2699.95. And this lens reminds me a lot of the 70 to 200. It does have a lot of contrast, but everything else optically is probably not as good as the 70 to 200. Middle of the road, really. Functionally, I had some problems with focus a few times. The copy I had, it seemed like it didn't want to focus at infinity, and it was a little jittery on subjects, not really hunting, but like hunting within a micron of where it should be focusing. It was very strange. Build quality is nothing bad, but nothing special, and while 100 to 400 is useful and 4.5 to 5.6 variable aperture is about the best you can expect from a variable aperture, the versatility of this particular focal length is limited inherently. Portrait, sports, wildlife, and a few landscapers, but I'm not doing a lot in this range. It's not the lens's fault, it's just the focal length. At this price, it's not a lens for everyone like our last lens in this list is, and I feel you're better off with a 4.5 prime if you're trying to get that 400. All of that combined, mixed with the price of our last lens, is why I changed the value of this lens from worth the money at one point to just 1 point. Just remember, before you get mad, I don't do decimal points in my score. I round down. So this lens is a 1 because I can't give it like a 1.6. The 180 to 600 f5.6 to 6.3 VR. I gave this lens a 3. It's $1899.95. This lens has really no standout features optically except color saturation. I found it very colorful. Everything else is just kind of serviceable. The build quality, well, it kind of felt a little cheap to me. However, 180 to 600 is a huge range, and its variable aperture of 5.6 to 6.3, that's not that bad. You don't even really need to change your ISO, from 180 to 600. You can totally recover that, making this lens a lot more versatile. Again, there aren't a lot of genres that are in this focal range that you would find this lens useful for, but what you're getting, it's not that expensive. Its price makes it accessible to those who aren't super serious about super telephoto, but enjoy some birds, some wildlife, some sports, just not enough to go for something more expensive. So that's why I consider this lens a high value 3. It gives a whole group of people a lower cost of entry into an otherwise expensive set of genres. Real quick, Daddy Z Wade needs a new pair of shoes. If you're considering picking up any of these lenses, check the links in the description. I get a 2% commission if you do so. We need to arrange these from best to worst. Now, I want you to ignore the 1, 2s, and 3s because we just need room here. So what would we call the worst value? If we're just talking usefulness, I really find the 24 to 50 f4 to 6.3 to be a bit of a goofy lens. It's really awkward, really awkward. And again, I'd never buy a 50mm f6.3 prime lens. And so I'm going to put this one in dead last. And actually, you may find this kind of surprising. Optically, this 100 to 400 is way superior to the 24 to 200, but 100 to 400 is a lot less useful to a lot more people, and 24 to 200 is probably going to just be more useful to more people, even though I hate it optically. We're talking about value for money. This is half the price of this, and you're covering more genres with this. Now, the ones that are kind of contested right here, we'll get those out of the way. This lens right here, I find it like overpriced a lot more than I find the 24 to 70 overpriced. And so I think the 24 to 70 is a better value because like optically it's just almost perfect. And so that brings us to needing to make more room. Let's fill in some of the top end. I think probably the best bang for the buck, I have to say, is probably the 24 to 120. I think that's like first place as far as just like usefulness goes. And the images come together so well. The 24 to 70 is optically superior, but probably not as useful as this, which is like less than $400. And so the 24 to 70 optically wins there. Mid-range zooms are probably going to be more useful to more people than the 180 to 600. And then let's move the PZ here. This is a better value to video people than photography people, but it's not bad optically. I just don't know if I want to put that in front of the 14 to 30 f4. I am going to put the 14 to 30 f4 as a better value because I think more people are interested in this kind of photography than people that would be interested in this kind of videography. The 14 to 24 is still, I find it to be slightly overpriced. And so I want to stick the 16 to 50, really useful to beginners. And then this one is significantly cheaper and you're kind of doing similar. No, because for the people that need 14, you gotta have 14. And so this is slightly more expensive, but yeah, we'll do the 17 to 28 here because I know that the 3mm on the wide end is gonna really annoy some people. So I'm all right with that. This is priced at exactly what it's worth. The 18 to 140. Actually, I find this one a little more useful, probably to more people. So let's bring this one over here. Kind of expensive though. Yeah, it's more versatile. We'll leave that. Bring these two back over here. Oh, nope. I want the 28 to 75. Those mid-range zooms, there's a lot of people that get the mid-range zooms. This one just being so dirt cheap, we'll keep it there. We'll bring this 28 to 75. It's kind of leaning towards a higher value. That 24 to 70 f4S kind of kills it. We'll keep it there. Let's file these in. Now the 70 to 180. Probably not as useful to as many people as the 28 to 400. This just covers so much ground, but this is kind of a better bang for the buck considering this is 70 to 200 is so dang expensive. This may be unpopular, but I think the 70 to 180, just because of the 70 to 200, it's a better bang for the buck than this one, even though this one is more useful, but it is just more useful. It's 1,300 bucks. I can't stack them. That wouldn't be fair. This is kind of more bang for the buck, I think, and denoising technology is pretty good, so shooting at f8 at a higher ISO in the middle of the freaking day probably ain't gonna bug you that much. Let's check these out, make sure I'm happy with this. Actually, I kind of hate it. Oh well. In first place, we got the 24 to 120, followed by the 50 to 250, followed by the 24 to 70 f4S in third place, and fourth place, the 180 to 600. And, no, I'm going to leave those. I was thinking about switching those, but the 14 to 30 f4S comes in at fifth place. Sixth place, we've got the 12 to 28, mostly for probably video people and vloggers. It's probably higher value than where it's at right now. The 16 to 50 coming up in seventh place here. In eighth place, the 28 to 75, 2.8, followed by the 18 to 140, f3.5 to 6.3. The very expensive and hard to argue the price, but slightly overpriced, 14 to 24, f2.8s, followed by the lens that's way cheaper and not as good optically as the 14 to 30, but in 11th place, the 17 to 28 f2.8, followed by the hyper versatile average optically, 28 to 400 f4 to f8, followed by the 70 to 180 f2.8. In 14th place, I think is where we are, the 24 to 70 f2.8s, followed by the 70 to 200 f2.8s. Surprisingly not in last place, the 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3. I guess that focal range really saved it here. And the fact that it's significantly less expensive than the 100 to 400 4556, and then the very, very awkward 24 to 50 f4 to 6.3 in last place. I totally forgot the 28 to 135 PZ because it wasn't down here. Oh, okay. We can't do that because this lens actually, this lens is actually pretty dang useful. For video people, it should be like way up here, even though it's really expensive. I would say usefulness is pretty high. The cost is pretty high. 28 to 135 is pretty versatile and power zoom is pretty versatile. So, usefulness, I've got to actually, it's a little bit more expensive than the 14 to 24, but probably a lot more useful. I'm going to put it about right there, I think. I'm glad I caught that, but I may have placed this different had it been part of my flow. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with the placement of every Nikon Z mount, Nikon branded zoom lens in the Z lineup, ranked by value, best to worst. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.